The room went completely silent the moment Emily slipped her wedding ring off her finger and placed it gently on the table. Everyone expected tears. Everyone expected a scene. Her husband braced himself for accusations. The other woman braced herself for humiliation. Instead, Emily looked at both of them one final time, picked up her purse, and walked toward the door without saying a single word. That silence would end up costing one man everything he thought he had built. Before we continue, if you believe dignity is stronger than revenge, please take a moment to like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe to Emma Drama Stories. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose peace over war. Emily had given 13 years of her life to building a future with Daniel. When they first got married, they had almost nothing. She worked double shifts as a hospital nurse while he studied at night and interned for free, chasing a dream no one else believed in yet. Every missed birthday, every canceled vacation, every night she stayed up holding him together after another failed pitch. She told herself it was an investment. That real love meant staying through the storm, not just the sunshine. When success finally came, it came fast. Daniel's startup took off almost overnight. Their second-hand car was replaced with something German and expensive. A glass-walled house on the hill replaced their cramped apartment. Galas, private clubs, magazine features, a completely different life. What nobody saw in those magazine photos was how much of that success had been carried quietly, invisibly, on Emily's back for over a decade. But the higher Daniel rose, the further he drifted. Success didn't just change his bank account, it changed him. Attention became something he craved. Compliments from strangers started to matter more than conversations with his wife. That's when Claire entered the picture. A sharp, magnetic brand consultant who made Daniel feel like the version of himself he'd always wanted to be seen as. Business dinners quietly turned into late-night calls. Late-night calls turned into conferences that lasted suspiciously long. Daniel told himself he'd earned this after years of grinding. He forgot that the life funding all of it existed because someone had once believed in him for free. Emily felt the distance long before she had proof. The calls got shorter. Family dinners disappeared from the calendar. His smile, the one that used to be only hers, now only appeared when a text lit up his screen. She blamed herself first. Maybe she'd become boring. Maybe she'd stopped trying. So instead of confronting him, she tried harder to be kind, hoping love could find its way back through whatever ambition had buried it under. Then came the rainy Saturday that changed everything. Emily had quietly planned a surprise dinner at the small restaurant where they'd had their very first date, the one with the crooked candles and the menu that never changed. She walked in expecting to surprise her husband. Instead, she found him already there, with Claire, laughing the way he hadn't laughed with her in years. The restaurant seemed to freeze. A few of their old friends were seated nearby, and every one of them recognized Emily instantly. The room fell into that horrible, expectant silence, the kind where strangers brace themselves for a scene they'll talk about for months. Daniel shot up from his chair, already fumbling for an explanation his own mind hadn't finished building. Claire crossed her arms, almost amused, clearly expecting Emily to scream, cry, maybe even throw something. Instead, Emily walked over calmly. She slid her wedding ring off her finger and set it down beside Daniel's untouched wine glass. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him with something far heavier than anger. 13 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and broken promises all sitting quietly behind her eyes. Then she turned around and walked out. For good. That silence haunted Daniel more than screaming ever could have. The divorce moved quickly. Emily asked for nothing beyond what was fair. No public statements, no courtroom drama, no online exposés, even though friends practically begged her to say something. She didn't want bitterness renting space in her head for the rest of her life. She moved into a small apartment a few blocks from the hospital where she worked. She sold jewelry she no longer wore. She started growing tomatoes on a tiny balcony. On weekends, she began volunteering at a women's shelter, helping others rebuild after their own versions of betrayal. Somewhere in that simple, quiet life, she found something she hadn't felt in years, peace that belonged only to her. Meanwhile, Daniel introduced Claire to his world of yachts, galas, and designer everything. On the outside, it looked like he'd won. Underneath, cracks were already spreading. Claire liked the success. She had no interest in what came after it. Investors began raising eyebrows at Daniel's increasingly reckless decisions. Longtime partners who once respected his work ethic now only saw arrogance. Then came the deal that broke everything. Against every warning from his own advisors, Daniel poured a massive amount into a high-risk investment, certain his instincts couldn't fail him. They did. Spectacularly. Money evaporated. Lawsuits piled up. Clients disappeared. The same people who once filled his mansion for parties stopped returning his calls. Claire stayed exactly as long as the luxury did. The morning the bank froze his accounts, she packed her bags and left a short note behind. Something about needing someone who could maintain the lifestyle she deserved. For the first time in years, Daniel sat completely alone in a mansion that suddenly felt enormous and empty, the silence eerily similar to the one Emily had left behind. Months later, Daniel found himself at a charity fundraiser hosted by the hospital. And there she was. Emily. No designer dress, no jewelry, just quiet confidence standing in front of a full room talking about healing, resilience, and starting over after heartbreak. The applause she received wasn't the kind money could buy. Watching her, Daniel finally understood something. He hadn't just lost a company. He had lost the one person who loved him before any of the success ever arrived, and no amount of excitement could ever replace that kind of loyalty. Their eyes met across the room for a brief second. Emily gave him a small, calm smile. Not bitter, not longing, just at peace. Then she turned back to the people whose lives she was quietly rebuilding, one conversation at a time. That smile taught Daniel the lesson he'd spent years refusing to learn. Emily never needed revenge. Life had already handed him every consequence on its own. Her real victory was never about watching him fall. It was realizing that through all of it, she had never once lost herself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Emma Drama Stories for more emotional stories like this one. Before you go, tell us in the comments. If you were in Emily's place, would you have walked away quietly or confronted them? We genuinely love to hear your take. Sometimes the loudest victory is won in silence. Sometimes the strongest kind of revenge is simply choosing peace. Emily walked away with nothing but her dignity, and it turned out to be the only thing that ever truly mattered. Daniel lost his fortune, his reputation, and everyone who only loved him for his success. Emily lost a marriage, but she found herself. And in the end, that was worth more than anything he ever thought he owned.